Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Christina and I make videos about motherhood, lifestyle, and occasionally fitness. But today we are talking about the third trimester recap. And I have a little bit of a confession. My daughter is 1.5 years old. Oops. This video is so long overdue, but this last 1.5 years has been insane in the best way possible. It's been busy, it's been hectic, it's been amazing, and I am just now finding the spare time in my life to be able to sit down and record these videos again. So here we are. Now, even though it has been 1.5 years, I still have it very fresh in my brain what the third trimester was like because I wrote it all down as it was happening in this notebook because I knew I would need to have a reference to look back on when the time came for me to upload this video. So if I am looking over it all, it is because I am looking back at my notebook and reminding myself of everything that was going on during that last trimester. So this video is going to cover weeks 29 through 40. And yeah, let's get started. So for week 29, I wrote down that I was congested. I had a crazy shortness of breath, which at that point you're getting large and in charge, and shortness of breath is to be expected, basically. And I also wrote down that I had rib pain, back pain, and I was also starting to get back into being very tired all the time. For week 30, I wrote down that I had a growth scan and an OB appointment. I wrote that movement was starting to get uncomfortable. Instead of the little flicks and kicking, she was starting to do more rolling motions, and I noticed that when those happened, I kind of had to stop and be like, ooh, that didn't feel good. So yes, her movements were getting a lot more uncomfortable. 30 weeks was also the beginning of the shift into the every 2-week appointment. As you get closer to your due date, you start shifting into more frequent OB visits. So 30 weeks was the beginning of starting to go in every 2 weeks for me. I also, during week 30, got a yoga ball because I was having quite a bit of hip pain and rib pain, and I read that doing yoga ball exercises can help with that. So I got a yoga ball and it did very much help. Anytime I was feeling uncomfortable hip pain, I would just sit on the yoga ball and I would just roll around and do circles with my hips, and it helped so much. I also had my baby shower that week and it was a blast. We celebrated baby girl to the nines and she was just so loved already, and yeah, it was a blast. I also wrote down that my nesting mode hit at this point. I wanted to clean anything and everything in sight. I even gave the dogs baths this week because I felt like they were dirty and I was trying to clean the house, and I was just thinking to myself, how am I supposed to clean the house if the dogs are dirty? So I gave them baths. During week 31, I wrote down that I had more rib and back pain, which I later learned was because little Mrs. Foot was right in my rib cage, and so every time she'd move, she would punch my rib. So later on, I found out that just pushing my hand down on her foot and kind of moving it away from my ribs was a huge relief to me. And so after a while, I feel like I was just kind of walking around permanently going like this, holding her foot away from my ribs. Yeah, that was something else. I also wrote down that I was having a lot of fatigue again this week, and my dogs were slowly becoming more and more clingy. I feel like they probably could tell that things were changing and that something new was coming, and they just really didn't know what to think about it. During week 31, I also experienced my first bout of lightning crotch. And if you don't know what that is, it's hard to explain. until it happens. And then you go, oh, okay. That's lightning crotch, got it. I also noticed during week 31 that my colostrum was starting to come in. If I was in the shower, I would leak colostrum. So that was pretty cool to see, because if you didn't know already, I had a breast reduction when I was 20 years old. And one of the risks that you take with a breast reduction is not having the ability to breastfeed. And that was a risk that I was willing to take personally. So up until this moment, I had no idea whether or not I would be able to breastfeed. And so seeing colostrum leak was really, really cool and really exciting, and gave me a lot of hope that I would be able to breastfeed. I also, during week 31, out of absolutely nowhere, started craving milk. Now, I like milk. I've always liked milk, but the way that I was drinking milk, like there was some sort of milk shortage, was absolutely insane. I would say on average, I was drinking probably 4 or 5 tall glasses of milk every single day. It was insane. During week 32, I wrote that I started getting a lot of pelvic pressure. I started cramping. I started getting nauseous again for the first time since about 15 weeks. I was still experiencing quite a bit of fatigue, and I wrote down in my book, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I wrote down milk in all caps, because it was just, the milk craving was still going strong. I wanted to drink like a gallon a day. I was just, every waking moment, I was like, milk, 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 milk. It was just, it was so weird. During week 33, I started experiencing some pretty rough round ligament pain, especially down in my lower abdomen, right under my bump. Was pretty gnarly. I also wrote down that my acid reflux started coming back, which we love. I started taking my acid reflux medication again that I had during my first trimester, because yeah, drink too much water, acid reflux. Eat too close to bed, acid reflux. Just, it was something I was really hoping wouldn't come back, but unfortunately it did. During week 34, I wrote down that I had more pelvic pressure. I also was experiencing some back aches. Nothing too crazy, just, you know, carrying all the weight. Your back is kind of sore. I also noticed during this week that it was getting harder to move. I was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I would later find out actually that I had a ton of amniotic fluid, way more than the average person. And so yeah, it pretty much looked like I was carrying twins when I was late in pregnancy. So that's cool. During week 35, I wrote down that I had an energy burst and nesting really kicked into overdrive. I also had a lot of sciatic pain, and then I also had a visit at the ER during week 35 because I went in for a standard OB appointment and my heart rate was not good. My resting heart rate was sitting right around 122 beats per minute, and so they put me on a non-stress test, made sure baby was okay, and then they told me that they recommended that I go to the ER and have an EKG done to make sure that my heart was okay. So that was a bit scary, but we went and my heart was fine, but then they sent me up to labor and delivery because they noticed that every once in a while my heart rate would spike, and that was where I learned that I was actually having contractions. I had just kind of figured that they were Braxton Hicks, didn't really think much of them, but no, they were actually contractions. At week 36, I wrote down that I was having a lot of breast pain. I felt like things were really starting to go on in there and my body was getting ready to be able to feed a newborn. I also wrote down that I scheduled my induction this week. I went in for a regular checkup and my doctor told me that she was worried about possible shoulder dystocia with my daughter because I have very narrow hips and my husband's family historically births large babies, and our daughter was already measuring at about 9 pounds. And so she thought that it would be best if I was to be induced a little before my due date because she was worried if my daughter grew much more, birth would not be fun. So I scheduled an induction for 39.5 weeks, which was May 25th. During week 37, I wrote down that the fatigue was really starting to hit and I was having more consistent contractions. I also noticed that my bump had started to drop. If I put pressure on the top of my bump, it was flat. Baby girl was down low and things were moving. During week 38, I wrote down that I had more pelvic pressure, a lot more lightning crotch, more nausea, and I was also feeling a lot more tired and feeling like I wanted to be sedentary a lot more. There was a lot more sitting on the couch, sleeping, just kind of taking it easy in the weeks leading up to my daughter's birth. For week 39, I wrote that I was ready for baby to come. I was still having contractions, and then at 39 weeks and 4 days, I was induced. I started the induction process on the 25th of May, and our baby girl was born on the 26th of May after a very long labor and an unexpected C-section. That is all I have for the third trimester recap. I obviously cannot show you guys a live bump date, but I will insert a picture right here of what my bump looked like at the end of the third trimester. She was large, she was in charge, definitely looked like I was pregnant with twins there at the end. But that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and until next time, I'll see you later.